to my journal. I'm Steffanie Rivers. Thanks for joining. Come on in to the conversation. You're watching the TriCast or multicast. I'm simulcasting on Facebook Live and YouTube and Twitter and LinkedIn and some other platforms. Thank you for joining. And I've got some great new, my subscribers are growing. So thank you for subscribing to my channel. If you are new to the conversation, we want to welcome you. And if you are returning, welcome back to the conversation. Now, I saw a post the other day that said, I want to live in a country where Colin Kaepernick is seen as the hero and not Kyle Rittenhouse as seen as the hero. And I responded to that person and said, if you want to see that, you probably need to consider moving to a new country. Because in America, that's how it is in America. People would rather, if they could, they'd probably convict Colin Kaepernick for kneeling for social injustice more than they would convict Kyle Rittenhouse for murdering two people and the attempted murder of a third person. So that's the type of country that we live in. The inconvenient truth of a teenage killer. That's what we'll be talking about today. So stay tuned. Hi, I'm Steffanie Rivers, and I want justice for Brianna Taylor because the police officers involved showed reckless disregard for her life and the lives of her neighbors. Her. So you're saying she essentially died on the floor right there?
Second that she got shot, she was.
Family, did the city of Birmingham, did anybody say, did the church, did anybody say there's more to Hello and welcome back to my journal. I'm Steffanie Rivers and you're watching the video version of my journal. Now, as much as some white people say they want equal justice and equal opportunity in America, when inconvenient truths are revealed like modern day lynchings of Ahmaud Arbery, modern day lynchings like Brianna Taylor's and George Floyd's, just to name three, these same white people, they find every excuse in the book to defend the indefensible. They say things like, well, they should have complied. They say things like, well, she was involved with criminals. He should have stopped running when they asked him to stop running. They say things like he was on drugs. They come up with all kinds of excuses as to why things happen, that the modern day lynchings, like the indefensible, they come up with all these reasons why they protect people's blatant racism. White people would rather present an image of equal justice, even when the evidence shows the opposite is running rampant. So when I watched the video of Kyle Rittenhouse as he testified during his murder trial, and he broke down on the witness stand, I knew that it was a strategic move on the part of his defense. And here's why. When the facts don't completely support that person's storyline, when the facts don't completely support Kyle Rittenhouse's explanation, when the law doesn't support his actions, when the law doesn't support a white person's actions, then they start claiming that, one, they feared for their lives, and then they start crying. And if they have a gun in their hands or they have a weapon, then they feel like they are justified by any means to start shooting, to start doing whatever they need to do, they claim, to defend themselves, even when the evidence doesn't show their storyline as being factual. And so that's what we have going on here. And now in some states, check this out in your state. State legislators are passing laws that will allow a driver of a vehicle to actually run over people who are protesting in the area, protesting in the street, perhaps. There are laws that say if a person fears for their lives in their car, fear for their lives from people who are protesting, pedestrians, that they have the right to run over them if they fear for their lives. So you'll have people now who will practically run over and possibly kill pedestrians who are exercising their right to free speech by protesting against social injustices. And they will use those new state laws to possibly harm those people because, again, some people have a tendency to claim they fear for their lives when they don't like the situation that they're in. And if they have a weapon, and we know a vehicle can be sometimes the deadliest weapon, they have a tendency to use whatever weapon they have at their disposal. So you're going to see more of that, I believe, because as more people start to actually protest and start to come out and speak out, you're going to see people who don't like what you have to say, who don't like what I have to say. They're going to use the laws in their states to claim that they feared for their lives. And that's what Kyle Rittenhouse did. And so if you missed Kyle Rittenhouse's testimony where he simulated crying, and I say simulated crying because there were no tears. There were no tears. I looked at the video countless times. There were no tears. And if you watch that 1 minute video of him from when he started answering the attorney's questions to when he started simulating crying, he was not able to produce tears. And I'm going to show you the video. And I'm going to show you that video. But first, I want you to know I'm doing so under the Copyright Act of 1976, which says that I can share copyrighted video for the purpose of commenting, critiquing, and educating and criticizing. So that's what we're going to do today. And I decided to show you on my phone because it was better to do that. It was easier to do that. So
Mr. Roosevelt was now running from my right side, and I was cornered from in front of me with Mr. Zeminski, and there were people right there.
Okay, so that took about a minute, and if you watched that video, and you might not might not have been able to tell on my phone, but essentially there were no tears. He never cried. The whole 45 seconds to a minute that he was simulating tears, there were none. And so that was obvious. And he just kept waiting for the judge to say something or somebody to like stop it. And finally, when they did, he cleared up his face. His face cleared up. And so that is yeah, go back and look at the video. And if you haven't already, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel so that when I post new videos, you will be the first to know. So the whole time, Rittenhouse never actually produced tears. I'm calling him now the male Becky or the Brad, because at least some white women, when they fake tears, fake cry, at least they can, on cue produce tears to for visual effects. This guy he wasn't able to do that. So he's not very good at it, but he knows, and his defense team knows, that if he starts to cry, or try to cry, that he will garner some type of sympathy. So he faked crying because he was on the stand, and he was asked, the question he was asked was, so tell us what was going on. How did it happen? And I guess he claimed, I was remembering back, and he even called himself, I was being assaulted, or I was being attacked. But now the judge, remember, already said in the trial that the dead people, the two people that Kyle Rittenhouse shot and killed, they can't be called victims. But it's okay for the dude who shot them to call himself a victim. So there's that. And that's the reason, one of the reasons why I say it was orchestrated, because there were no tears. Secondly, he wanted to appear to cry on the witness stand to present himself as a victim in the heat of the moment on the streets of Kenosha County, and that's in Wisconsin. Now, while the judge ruled that Kyle's victims, the people who were dead, they can't be named, they can't be considered, or can't be characterized as victims, it's okay for Kyle to characterize himself as a victim, which makes no sense. And so now, because his defense attorneys know that that's okay, that now you can't call them victims, well, let's make you a victim. Let's present you as a victim. So that's what's going on in this trial. And even though Rittenhouse was the one who did the shooting and killing and wounding of a third person, and he actually shot at a fourth person that they have not been able to identify. Kyle Rittenhouse shot an AR-15 rifle 8 times, ladies and gentlemen. And he was walking the streets with a loaded AR-15 at 17 years old, when he should have been at home in another state, because he crossed state lines to do what he did. Instead of being at home in Illinois, he's portraying himself as a victim. Now, this is an example of how white people create an image of something when the evidence clearly shows the opposite. Rittenhouse claimed that he was there to administer medical assistance to people in need, which he never did. And in fact, when he shot people and they needed medical assistance, he didn't give them any aid. And so, again, he shot at 4 people, shot 3 of them. The fourth one, we don't know what happened. They have never come forth. And he didn't even try to help any of the people that he shot. So that's why I say this is an orchestrated effort on the part of the defense Okay. And number three, if the jury sees Rittenhouse crying on the stand, his defense team hopes that they will begin to think of him more as a child who was unable to handle the adult situation that he was in, um, and find him not guilty of murder because they will look at him as a confused child in the moment, rather than looking at Rittenhouse, um, looking behind the Brad Becky tears and asking, if Rittenhouse was such the confused child, then why was he walking the streets with a loaded rifle to begin with? Because most 17-year-olds, they don't do that. That's not how they behave with that much bravado, walking around the streets of a strange area with a rifle um, at your ready, loaded, as we now know. That just doesn't speak to a confused 17-year-old or a confused child. It just doesn't. Now, while I realize that a 17-year-old might physically look as an adult, and at the same time can be emotionally a child and often is, um, that is the question. It doesn't mean that he shouldn't be held liable and he shouldn't be held accountable and he shouldn't have to pay. That doesn't mean that. For me, it means that either he pays for his crimes or the parent or his parents pay for his crimes. Remember when you were in school? I remember this. When if you did something wrong, or even watching these judge shows these days, if a child does something to create damage or break something up the street or at the school or anywhere, if a child does something that causes damage or is a criminal act, the parents are held liable. Remember that? So I wonder, why is it that nobody has brought up, at least I've not heard, nobody has brought up the fact that this 17-year-old, then 17-year-old, was walking the streets of a different city, a different state, in fact. And where was his parental um, um, where was his parental observation? Where were his parents? Where was the authority over him that allowed him to be where he was? So last time I read something, it said his mother dropped him off at the state line, and let him walk the streets. Now, I don't know if he had the rifle when he left his mother's uh, care or his mother's view, but apparently one of Rittenhouse's friends purchased the weapon for him. Now, so maybe they met up, but that doesn't matter, because as a minor, your parents are still responsible for your actions, and whatever those actions are, somebody needs to be held liable. So the cops say that his friend illegally purchased the AR-15 for Rittenhouse. So then that leads me to ask, well, who was the weapon registered to? Because that person needs to be held accountable. Because if you didn't give Kyle the weapon, you should have known where your AR-15 was. That's just not some baby gun laying around that got lost in the drawer. That's an AR. That's an assault rifle. Okay, so especially under the circumstances that two people were shot and killed by that weapon. So who dropped him off? Who allowed Rittenhouse to be where he was? Who gave him the gun? Who registered the gun? Because as an underage person, I don't think you can register a weapon. So he's walking around the streets lying about why he was there, saying he was there to administer medical attention in case it was needed, shoots people, and now he wants people to believe that he was a confused child, and now he shouldn't be held liable. And if anybody on the jury thinks that as well, and they empathize with Kyle's position, I would ask them to consider this. What if that was your son that he shot and killed? How would you want Kyle Rittenhouse to be treated then? Would you want him to just get off because he was only 17 and he was a confused child? Or would you be wanting justice for your family member? I think you would be wanting justice for your family member. So I would say get justice. If you're on the jury, get justice for the family members of the people that he killed. And if you truly think that he shouldn't be held liable, then we need to be looking at his parents, and we need to be looking at the person who purchased the gun and registered the weapon and allowed a 17-year-old minor to walk the streets with it. That's what needs to happen. So a lot of times when we look at what's going on, we don't consider the people who are no longer here to defend themselves or their name. We want to side with, oh, well, he's just 17 years old, but not any 17-year-old would be walking the streets with an AR-15, and nor should they. And his parents should be held accountable. Now, I've only seen his mom. When they talk about his parents, they only talk about his mom. So, I don't know where his father might be, but wherever his daddy is, if he's still alive, him and his mama need to be held accountable. And maybe she's the what is that called? The guardian, the parental guardian. She has sole custody. Somebody needs to be held accountable. And so that's, when I see, and I hate to be desensitized to the point where when I see some people cry, I'm like, okay, enough with the drama. Just cut this scene because I'm not buying it. Well, in this case, I'm not buying that Kyle Rittenhouse was actually crying, especially since there were no tears. So we'll keep watching this trial, as well as the trial of the McMichaels who shot and killed or charged with murdering Ahmaud Arbery in Georgia. We'll keep track of that. And if you have been keeping track of that, you know that the defense attorney said in open court the other day that he didn't want any black pastors showing up, causing trouble, protesting. Okay, so that speaks to the power of protests, that this defense attorney would stand up and say he doesn't want them to show up, one. And number two, it speaks to his comfort in saying out loud, I don't want no black people showing up down here, because that is their right. This is like a free country. They can show up, whoever can show up and protest if they want to. So for him to say that in open court, one, shows what type of atmosphere is occurring around in that county and around this case for the defense attorney to even say that out loud. And number two, the fact that he did shows that he is he considers them to be a force. He considers protesters, black pastors in particular, saying he names some names. He considers them to be a force to be reckoned with. And that's why I think they're going to show up in numbers next week. They're going to show up down there and show out as black pastors will, whatever that means, they're going to be there. And so we have to keep watch and let people know that it's a new day, and you might continue to act as if there has been no progress, but I am not the same. This is not your 1960s group of black folks that you're dealing with today. Okay, it's a whole new generation and a generation after that. And so that's what we're dealing with, and we will act accordingly. So to find out more about the things about, you can go to the written version of my journal. That's at eurweb.com. Thanks and have a super day.